Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. Now you are going to be privileged to talk to a man who's dealt with so much across the space of both conflict and the consequences of conflict. Alex Pama, when he was Vice Admiral, commanded the Philippine Navy at a time when China claimed much of the West Philippine Sea, much of those territories. Then after that, he moved on to maritime security. He also was at one point working directly for the Secretary of National Defense. And 6 years ago, he took over a critical post for every Filipino, which is to head the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council. So long, NDRRMC. But all it means is, what are you going to do when disaster strikes? With us today is Undersecretary Alex Pama to talk about how he helped institutionalize some of the actions that will save our lives in the future. Alex, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much, Reza, Maria, for inviting me here. It's indeed an honor and a privilege to be talking with you guys.
It is so good to have watched all your actions over the last 6 years. I mean, it was a very daunting task. Did you accomplish what you set out to do?
Yes, I did. But first of all, if I can make a little correction, I got into NDRMC 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So I'm so sorry. Yes.
Yeah, 2 years ago,
Yes.
because I retired from the Navy in December of 2012. After that, I was given the task to manage the National Coast Watch Council Secretariat for Maritime Security. And after Haiyan or Yolanda, I got a call to take over the job of OCD and DRRMC. So 2 years to be
So
exact.
after the worst typhoon to ever
Yes,
hit
after, yeah.
land in the
After
world,
it hit
right?
land.
Okay.
So-
what did you set out to do?
Well, when I came in, I saw the more or less the challenges ahead of me, and maybe it's worth mentioning that one of the articles here in Rappler gave me some sort of a benchmark on how I can more or less proceed. If I'm not mistaken, if I remember right, it was the article written at Rappler and a comment by a respected environmentalist, Dean Tony Lavinia,
Yeah.
when he said. I can't remember the exact words, but basically he was saying something to the effect that whoever gets to be put in that position, it's a gargantuan task. It's almost an impossible task.
Yes.
So from my point of view, I took it as a challenge.
Yes.
I love challenges. And I tried to look at it, tried to analyze it, and saw in what he said some of the tips, if you may, on the issues that need to be addressed. And what I saw basically when I came in, there are three things that needed to be addressed immediately.
Okay.
First is the credibility of the organization. Second, looking at it, it's the capacity. It's very, very much short. And then the third is the capability. When I talk capacity, it's more in the context of the human resource in it.
Right.
When I talk capability, it's more in the context of the wherewithal of the organization. And then we're not just talking about the structure. That would come later. But
Right.
most of all, is the credibility. I came in at the time, unfortunately, at the time when the credibility of the organization, the government for that matter, relative to how we handle disasters as, I would not say, not the nadir.
Yes. No,
But-
it was at the near. I mean, Yolanda, the government took a lot of flack
They took a
for
lot of
how
beating.
slow
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
was
So-
and had reacted.
Yeah, I took it as a challenge
Okay.
and tried to look at it from where I was coming from. In the military, we were what you would call conflict managers. Now I was getting into a job which I thought was going to be, true enough, it's a consequence management. You basically manage the consequences of calamities and disasters.
Right.
So when I looked at it, I said the best thing, the end goal basically, is to reduce the detrimental effects of a calamity or a disaster. And coming from my training, which is conflict management,
Yes.
I tried to look at it to lessen the consequence. You have to manage the
The
conflict.
conflict itself.
And the conflict here are natural hazards or even human-induced hazards. You manage that in the context of a pre-disaster. Then you lessen the effects of that hazard to the extent that the consequences now will be minimized. I think after 25 months, I can look back and say, to a certain extent, maybe we have succeeded in that. Because if we look at statistics as one of the indicators, relative to the casualties. In 2014, we had about 295 casualties, meaning fatalities.
Yes.
14, that's 2014.
Right.
In 2015, we only had about 155.
So you were able to cut it significantly.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, more or less, that's basically how I try to approach it. And it's not because of Pama.
Mhm.
It's because of, number one, the cooperation of the stakeholders. First, cooperation of the people within the organization, meaning the OCD,
Right.
and then subsequently the member agencies of the NDRRMC, and then eventually it cascaded into the public at large, the
Right.
stakeholders.
So you looked at them as concentric circles.
It is,
Yes.
it is. Concentric circles, and if you're going to do some sort of a PERT CPM, it's a movement with a lot of branches going all together. At the end of the day, you end up coming up with a system
Yes.
and a process that we now want to institutionalize to make PAMA irrelevant. Meaning to say whether I'm there or not, and I won't be there a couple of days from now, but I'm confident that the system and the process will continue to work.
Interesting. Was there any kind of framework there before you came in? I mean, was there anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, when I came in, I studied the lay of the land, if you
Yeah.
may.
Yeah.
We have a very good law, the
Yep.
Republic Act 10121.
Right.
It's actually it's acknowledged as one of the best
The
laws
best
in
in
the world.
Correct.
We
But
have
it
a
was
very good plan.
execution. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we have a very good implementing rules and regulations, but it definitely stands improvement,
Yes.
which is a work in progress right now.
Right.
We have a very good plan.
Yes.
We have a very good framework. A framework that's starting from the division of 4 equal parts of the 4 thematic areas, and having a vision that eventually most of the work that will be undertaken will be prevention and mitigation. It's a work in progress. So that framework that we have is good. So the challenge that I took upon myself is, how do you implement this? Implementing it in the context of needing a process, needing a system,
Right.
needing the people who would do it,
Right.
and a paradigm now that is what do you call this, very much attuned to what we set out for, which is from a reactive disaster management to a pre-disaster, a proactive process.
So that's actually a great point that you made, that you went to the cause and then managed that before you dealt with the collateral damage that would
Yeah.
come from that, right? So what were the challenges? I mean, you came into this, you had a lot of different agencies reporting to you, cabinet secretaries reporting to you, and yet you had no real formal authority,
Yeah.
right? How did you build the systems?
It's quite interesting. Well, what I did, I mean, looking at the law, meaning to be the midst and bounds of my authority,
Right.
looking at the framework or the playground where I can do these things, I approached in the context of being loyal to the 4 thematic areas.
Okay.
We are aware what the 4 thematic areas are: prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and
Mitigation.
recovery and rehabilitation.
Okay.
And these 4 thematic areas, they have vice chairs in the council. There are 4 cabinet secretaries who leads these thematic areas. DOST secretary for prevention mitigation, DILG for preparedness, DSWD for response, and NEDA for prevention and mitigation. I knew these were the essential parts of the machinery that would move insofar as disaster risk reduction and management is concerned. Each of these, they have their respective mandates.
Right.
But the challenge now is how to put this together and everybody row
In the same
in
direction.
the same intensity, in the same direction, so as we can now achieve what the common goal, which is reducing the risks of disasters. I'm not talking response, I'm talking about reducing the risks.
Right.
So what I did, I personally called on the 4 secretaries, and I requested for their promise that they would, and the buy-in that I needed from them. And fortunately, they gave it. Then after that, I did not stop there. I requested for the focal person that I can pester
Right.
24/7,
Right.
who would join me in every time that there is a need for that. And I was lucky that I was given.
Right.
So this now became what I call the core group of the disaster, pre-disaster
Right.
group. Now, the next challenge is what kind of a process or system we're going to put. We came up with what we call the pre-disaster risk assessment, action protocols and programs. The PDRA is both a tool and a process. It's a tool and a process that everybody has defined roles. Anybody who does not do what he's supposed to do, in Tagalog, is sinasabi natin bubukol.
Got it.
It will be quite obvious who
Right.
did not do his specific function.
Right.
So in that way, everybody now,
Accountability. You also have accountability.
to a certain
internally.
extent.
Yeah.
No, we don't have in writing some sort of a mandate that they can make each agency accountable. But in the context of everybody seeing what's happening, it would be obvious.
Yes.
If the forecast, for example, and the risk assessment by our scientists are correct, which again, fortunately, they have been quite accurate the past few months, DILG now, that preparedness has no reason to fail because they know what's going to come. And knowing what's going to come is not just on the basis of early signal number 1, number 2, number 3. We have gone to the extent of, with this PDRA, the warnings now that will come will be areas hazard specific,
Yes.
area focused, and time bound. Meaning to say we know what kind of hazard will hit us,
Yes.
whether it's rain, whether it's wind. We know it's area focused, where are the areas that it's going to hit, and time bound. Meaning to say when this hazard's going to hit these areas.
Right.
So on the basis of that, the ILG now, or the preparedness cluster, would know what to do.
Yep.
Eventually, consequently, I think you understand that the ILG now has what they call the OPLAN list.
Correct.
It's a checkoff list
Yes.
on the
Yes.
basis of what's anticipated to come.
You implemented the cluster system.
We did. We
Yeah.
did.
Explain the cluster system to people who may not be familiar
Well,
with that.
the cluster system is basically just an aggregation of the different, this is more focused on the response side. In the cluster system, we have identified the areas of respective responsibilities and designated the agencies who need to do this. Like for example, before, one of the what you might call the issues then was the accounting of the debt. That had been a lot of issues.
Correct.
So we now have a cluster responsible for that. We call it the management of the dead and the missing. So there's only 1, 2, or 3 agencies now who's responsible for that. We have other clusters on WASH, what they call the water, health and sanitation. We have another cluster for peace and order. Peace and order, looters don't even think it. We have
Yes.
this cluster who will do it. So the cluster now basically are the ones responsible to provide what is needed in disaster areas. And the implementation of that on the ground is what we have what we call the incident command system. There's only one SIGA
Yeah.
on the ground
Instead of yes.
instead of everybody shouting out. In much
Yes.
the same way at the national level,
Yes.
we have come to an agreement if there are warnings or there are coordination that had to be made, if it boils down to one person,
Right.
I got the responsibility of doing that. So there's only one. But I also put on stake my credibility
Yes.
on that.
So to summarize what you said, it's you got the right information, you created a flow of that information to the right people, and then you designated who would act when.
Yes.
And
yes.
and then you kept this system, you closed the loop,
Yep, yep.
connected it with the people. Tell us, I guess, what you would consider your greatest achievement. What are you leaving behind?
Well, I guess what I would be leaving behind is what I would always say, a process and a system, and starting the institutionalization of these things. I don't want to be narrating or mentioning what those memorandas
Yes.
or what those policies, SOPs But we needed to put it in writing because, as the
Yes.
saying goes, if it's not written,
it's-
it's not gonna happen.
I'm really learning that.
If it's not
And if you
written,
don't have a person assigned to it, it's not going to
it's
happen,
nothing.
right?
Well, as they say, the best way to kill an idea is throw it to a committee.
Yeah, yeah.
So, if at all, on your question, we are leaving behind, we're leaving behind a process and a system that's institutionalized. That maybe the next guys that will be coming in, not only this administration, but I mean down the road,
Yeah.
they can always just improve on it, or even set it aside.
Yeah.
It's their call. But I guess if you look back and look at the statistics, we do what you call disaster forensics.
Right.
Look at the statistics. I think you cannot argue with statistics so far.
Yes. President Aquino, in his exit interview, actually pointed to disaster risk reduction as one of his administration's main
Oh, well, thank you.
accomplishments. Starting with information, right? He talked about pag-asa, getting the right information and then having it flow through to NDRMC. What lessons did you learn in executing these ideas, the idea of how to make it better? What lessons did you learn?
Well, first, I think first and one of the challenging and exciting things that faces in this thing. I mean, if you talk is, I think we were one of the achievements. I think that accomplishments that I can say is we were able to bring in the scientists and agree on a lot of things. You know how it is. Scientists, just like artists, everybody has their own disciplines and all those stuff.
Right.
But then again, me as the consequence manager, for example, I cannot make risk-informed decisions on the basis of a cacophony of assessments.
Right. Right.
So, on the sciences, that's one. We were able to come together physically and mentally agree that, okay, once a forecast, an assessment is done, everybody follows that. Because it's also going to be their responsibility.
Correct.
So, again, managing those information became the next challenge. And in the implementation of the preparedness and response, now we were able to do it again on the basis of the PDRA that we've been saying, the pre-disaster risk assessment. Now, what we are trying to do is, we go back to what I was saying earlier. I don't want to look at the consequence,
Yes.
because consequence will just be a function of your preparedness.
Do you have anything that you would have wanted to do that you haven't been able to do?
Well, yeah, structure. Structure in the context that when I came in, I think one of the handicaps of the office was then the structure and the staffing. Structures in the context that we still need to improve on the structure of the OCD. It still lacks somewhere not only in the context of material assets, but on its mandate, on its description on how it can manage further disaster risk reduction and management. I'm fortunate enough that we are fortunate that the President Aquino approved our new structure in staffing. I mean to say on the new organizational structure, he approved it. And in the staffing, from a number of personnel of 300, we are now doubled with 600. And even the positions now have been institutionalized, plantilla positions already. Before, almost everybody was on a contractual basis. So even the people, when you say, you pay bananas, you get monkeys.
Yes.
I'm not saying the people consider monkeys. What I'm trying to say is, I mean, you give the people the right job, the right pay, and they will
Yes.
deliver. So if at all, the challenge now is for the new team to push the envelope insofar as institutionalizing and professionalizing our organization.
We have so many questions coming in on social media. I want to just throw some
Sure.
of this at you. From @Jaira, so @JXX Rojas, thank you for your question. How would you rate the Philippines' disaster preparedness? Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. How are we now?
Right now, I would say it's somewhere hovering around 8.
8.
Yeah.
And what would you like to see happen that will bring us to a 10?
I'm sorry.
What would you like to see happen that would bring us to a 10?
Complete the capacity and capability. Capacity meaning to say highly professionalize our people, and what comes with it maybe is a new law.
Yeah.
and restructuring the organization and bringing the capability, meaning the wherewithal of the organizations, both for the resilience and emergency management.
Lots of questions about your proudest legacy. Thank you for at Lou Sapientiales. What's your proudest legacy?
Saving a lot of lives.
That you did, the numbers show it. In terms, this is coming from at Ava Patricia. Hello, Ava. Should there be a move to separate OCD from DND so it can be more independent about budget and authority?
Yes. Actually, right now, we were just overtaken by events, but according to the 10121 law, 2015 was supposed to be the year where we are going to have the what you call the sunset review, and we already had a position, meaning recommending that at least the DRRM functions of OCD and the of OCD will be separated from the Department of Defense. If that pushes through with the 17th Congress, we are proposing for either an authority or a separate agency who would now be strengthened to address disaster risk reduction and management.
Fantastic. What are the odds that would happen?
I cannot second guess the members of Congress, the stakeholders who will be part of the public hearings in it. But now that I am in the private sector or in the public sector, a private citizen, private Pama, a citizen Pama, I would push for an organization that would be capacitated and given enough capability to be able to come up with a more robust agency. I already have an illusion, if you may, of having a department that I would call the Department of Resilience and Emergency Management.
Fantastic.
On 2 points. Resilience in the context of getting the two thematic areas of prevention and mitigation,
Right.
and recovery and rehabilitation, lump it up, because that's where you get the wherewithal for resiliency.
Yes. It's
And then-
preparing before it comes, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the building back better, which
Yeah.
is the recovery and rehabilitation, which is the fourth thematic area, can be the first thematic area. By the way, the four thematic areas should not be linear.
Yes.
It should be acyclic.
It's like circular.
So you now also have lump up the prevention and the preparedness and the response into what we can call a FEMA type Department of Emergency Management.
Fantastic. You haven't mentioned that you've also brought the public into this. I mean, in part of the reporting process. I mean, what have you changed? How has technology changed what you're doing?
Thank you for reminding me on that, because I think I would do not only Rappler or some other members in the media a disservice if I would not mention them in this exit briefing, if you may.
I wasn't trying
No,
to go
no,
to
no,
that,
no,
but
no,
I thought
no,
it
no,
was
no, but
actually a good innovation that you did.
Yeah, I mean, let's give credit where it's due. I was mentioning earlier about the credibility, capacity, and capability. That was basically more inward-looking to our organization. Now, when we reach a level of, I think, I had a level of confidence that more or less we got this thing, even in the context of getting the credibility, we needed the stakeholders, the media to spread the word, and the stakeholders to listen to us. Now, when we had the credibility, now we started to get the support of the people.
Yes.
In times of calamities, I think
Yes.
you more than anybody else knows that when we joined together on the Project Agos thing,
Yes.
the crowdsourcing that we had every time there's a typhoon was a significant help to us in managing responses.
No, it was an honor for us to be able to do this because it did actually help. I felt, we hoped that
Yeah.
it would, and you allowed us to
And even in mainstream media, if you remember, there was one typhoon that it was a Holy Week, and we
yes.
all know when Holy Week everybody goes on holidays, and,
Right.
and even the broadcast media were about to sign off, and I sent an appeal if they can continue broadcasting, and they did, and that definitely helped a lot. So
even though the typhoon veered away, no? I mean, that was,
Exactly.
we
Yeah,
were
yeah.
prepared. It was,
So I think from my part, on a personal note, I think I said maybe, just maybe, we have already gotten a degree of credibility with our stakeholders that everybody started to listen. And can I just go back to the simple formula? even ordinary people would ask me, they said, what's the formula that you guys were able to do
Right.
to more or less improve the system? I said, I have a very simple formula. It's a mathematical formula that every time I mention it, my teachers in math get so mad at me because it's mathematically wrong, but it's DRR correct. It's 1 plus 1 equals 0.
Okay.
It's mathematically wrong.
Right, right.
DRR wise, the first one is the government's preparedness. The government's preparedness, the government's capacity to address preparedness and response.
Yep.
The second one is the people's education, information, and buy-in and cooperation. You have these two,
Yeah.
you'll get equals 0. And what's 0? 0 casualty.
Mm, mm.
And in number of times in localities that was implemented, we had 0 casualties. Case in point, Gabaldon.
Yep.
I think you know that.
Yes.
In areas that wherein they think 1 plus 1 equals 0, they thought 1 plus 1 equals 2, they had casualties.
Yes. So the system works in your.
I think the system works.
Yeah.
I believe, not think, I believe the system works.
So who is the man who's going to be replacing you? And this is a question from Twitter, from somebody who volunteers for you at Rise Sur Africa. What's your advice to the incoming NDRR MCP?
The guy who's going to replace me is somebody by the name of retired General Ricardo Halad. He's a retired Army General. He's a graduate of the PMA class of 83. I worked with him when we were in the plans of the AFP. One thing I can say about the guy is a strategic thinker.
Great.
To cut the long description short, the guy's head and the heart is in the right place.
Yep.
And one thing about the guy, he listens and he does things according to the book.
You've done a transition already.
We've had a number of meetings.
Great.
I think the last count is about 3 meetings sitting down together, and he's starting to learn the ropes, and he's starting to realize what he's getting into. But my if at all, the unsolicited advice I give to him is one basically is coordination, teamwork, because not one person, not one organization can do it alone.
Fantastic. This is a great question from Twitter. Thank you, Lou, at Sapientales. How can ordinary citizens do their part in community-based disaster risk reduction?
Oh, that's a great question. One, as we all say, all disasters are local. And in all disasters, the very first people who can make a difference are individuals. So to address the question squarely on what can each and everyone do, first is know what you have to do to prepare.
Right.
It's the knowledge is the number one. And then number two, definitely in any locality, you have the barangay, you have your neighborhood. I mean, just talk about it. We don't expect you to become responders, but we expect you not to be responded
Yeah,
upon.
that's great. We don't expect you to be a responder, but we don't want you to be a respondent.
No, we don't expect it to be responded upon
Upon.
by our responders.
Got it. So don't be a burden.
Don't be a burden to our responders. When you're told to evacuate, follow.
Do it.
Because once you ask for an evacuation
Right.
in the middle of the typhoon,
Yes.
you're not only endangering your life, you're endangering the life of the responders as well.
Correct.
That's the biggest help an ordinary, I don't want to use the word, but every citizen can have
Yes.
own personal knowledge of what he needs to know about disasters.
Fantastic. This is a question from YouTube. Thank you, from Glaze Coat Epoxy. Is the training on LGU's managerial skill in a disaster included in the program?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
In fact, practically all barangays, all the way down to the barangays, we do have a what we call the community-based disaster risk reduction and management training.
Right.
And we have the
Yes.
basic instructor's guide. We can give it away for free.
You've really created a body of knowledge
Yes.
now, right? And
Yeah.
it's and we've also put some of that stuff in Rappler because we think we have to help each other
Yeah.
and help ourselves. This is about the private sector now. How did you harness the private sector, and what do you see them
Well,
What
I
role?
guess in Latin, what they say, the sine qua non for that was credibility.
Yes.
That's why one of the things that we worked on initially, immediately, is our credibility. Because if we don't have that, nobody will waste time listening to us. When we already had a modicum of credibility, we started to reach out. We know for a fact
Yes.
that all the stakeholders would want to help.
Yes.
But the first question that would come up is, are we credible enough for them to listen? Number two, are we credible enough to talk to them what we need? When we got that, now we have gone leaps and bounds. Maybe the last accomplishment that we've had, I can say, is we had what you call the Power Club. I don't know if you're aware of that. We were able to gather the captains of industries
Yes.
and talk to them, and they agreed. We did not ask for any
This
commitment.
is PDRF you're talking about, the Philippines.
Not
or
only
the
PDRF, beyond PDRF.
Beyond PDRF, the Power
Beyond
Club.
PDRF.
Okay.
We had captains of industries. I mean, I hope you don't mind
Yeah,
mentioning
please,
the names.
please, of course, go ahead.
The members of the PDRF, like the chairs, Cardinal Tagle was there.
Yes.
Jaime Ayala,
Ayala,
Mr.
Manny
Pangilinan,
Pangilinan.
Mr. Ramon Ang, Mr. Hansi, the Gokong Way Group, the Lopez Group,
Yes.
the Romulo Group. So we did not ask for anything specific. What we just offered, which they accepted and agreed upon, is we provided a paradigm and a platform where we can all come together and discuss what needs to be done to level up disaster risk reduction and management. Each and every one of them, they have their respective assets, which they have been putting in. What we only wanted to ask was that, hey, let's coordinate. We don't, sometimes we don't mind the gaps. I'm sorry, we don't mind the overlaps, but we
as
do
long
mind
as
the gaps.
Yeah,
And
fill
we
in
wanted
the
to
gaps.
prevent the gaps. They can do a lot.
Wonderful. What are you doing next?
I'm sorry,
What are you going to do next?
DBM?
Okay.
Not
You're
the
going
Department
in-
of Budget Management. Driver and bodyguard ni Mrs. No. Seriously, I need to get my bearings.
Okay.
Meaning to say, I have a lot of things that domestically, I had a lot of things to put in its proper place, books, souvenirs, and all those stuff, and maybe enjoy.
Oh, I don't think you'll be gone that long. But your last thoughts as you look back and move ahead.
You know, at this point, I would say, relative to disaster risk reduction and management, I would honestly say I think we have leveled up the way the Philippines does disaster risk reduction and management. In the context that I think a number of times we have been recognized internationally,
Yes.
and we have brought the process, the issue in the international level, not only bring it up there, but people all over the world are listening to us
Yes.
insofar as disaster risk reduction management. Case in point, we brought it to APEC with the framework
Yeah.
that we put in. We brought it to the Sendai
Yes.
World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction. The PDRA is institutionalized not only locally, but even in the Sendai Framework for
Yes.
Action. Paragraph 23, if I'm not mistaken, of the Sendai Framework. ASEAN-wise, everybody's listening to us when we talk disaster risk reduction.
Yes.
Maybe what we can do right now is internalize further not only the people, the government, the private sector, but collectively, let's look at disaster risk reduction already, not only as something we need to do, but as a way of life, and maybe even a resilient philosophy for all Filipinos.
Fantastic. So the one thing we didn't talk about, which is
I should have said philosophy of resilience.
yes. But the one thing we didn't talk about, which is implicit in everything you've said, is climate change, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how would you define the danger now to Filipinos?
If we don't do anything, it's a clear and present danger. And even in our efforts right now, we are trying our best to mainstream climate change adaptation, climate change, and disaster risk reduction. Eventually, one of my other dreams is to have climate change and disaster risk reduction under one roof, literally and figuratively.
Right. Because they're actually two sides of the same
Yes,
coin, right? Yeah.
two sides of the same coin.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very
Any
much.
last thoughts? You did a lot in 2 years. No.
Thank God. I think one of the things that maybe if I got there, it's definitely with a lot of prayers.
Okay. All right. Well, we look forward to seeing what the next chapter for Alex Pama is going to be. Thank you so much for your thoughts. If you guys have any more questions, there have been some really good ones coming through. Please use hashtag Rappler Talk. Yusek Pama is also on Twitter.
Yes,
Your
I am.
handle is
At Boulder 6.
at Boulder6. He's going to have to get that verified. No, at Boulder6.
That used to be my call sign when I was in the military.
Fantastic.
I just carried it over. Boulder as in malaking bato.
Malaking Bato, Boulder6. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.